your student doesn't need you to be their friend. They have friends. They don't need you to be their peer. They need you to be what we call a trusted adult.
If you haven't had that rapport, I'm not going to be listening as hard. You're going to have to work twice as hard to get through whatever you're trying to get through to me at that time.
Yeah. What is the thing that a mentor can do that a friend can't? Is give the powerful feedback that's going to help you to grow.
We also realize that the best way of getting higher quality tutoring is by tutors investing in themselves.
Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes.
Welcome. Hi. This is a new series. This is Love Tutoring with Qualified Tutor. I have been looking forward to developing some more ways to share my enthusiasm and insights with the Qualified Tutor community. And as many of you already know, I've just left my lovely school. And the reason why I did that was to pour all my energies into Qualified Tutor. And so what better way to do it than with this series, Love Tutoring. So here we are. Alex Asher from Learncube has kindly joined us to just give us a chance to start developing and discussing some of the key skills and topics that we want to talk about. It's a much more how-to series than the pods that we've usually been doing. In general, we interview other people, but in this case, Alex is actually going to be interviewing me, which is very generous of him, to sort of get this conversation going so that we can share some helpful tips and tricks with you. Thanks, Alex, for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here too.
Brilliant.
Let's get straight into it then.
Great. Let's talk about building engagement, because it can be really daunting to start with a new student. And even after working with a student for weeks or months, your energy can flag and you can start to wonder, are they with you or are they secretly watching Netflix? So what are we going to do to build engagement? That's the question. And it's hard enough face-to-face and it's double hard online. You and I both love to work online. And I've been tutoring on Learncube recently, and I find it fantastically useful and adaptable. And I'm bringing lots of different resources on there. Let me see if I can explain to you how I build engagement. I'm working on 4 steps. Sure. My 4 steps that sort of go together and build together are positivity, personalization, pitch and pace, and partnership. I know it sounds like 5, but pitch and pace go together.
It's really only 4 P's. So everyone,
it's the 4 Ps. We can't talk about the 4 Ps because in Qualified Tutor we have the 7 Ps of professionalism, and there is such a thing as too much alliteration. So we're just going to focus on these 4 steps and see if they're going to help. Positivity, as you can hear, is ramping up the energy. Trade secret, I don't actually talk like this in real life. I just talk like this when I'm tutoring online. I find that a great big warm welcome, tons of enthusiasm, really, really creates energy in a session, and the student feeds off that. My instinct is that when the student is ready to log on, as the student sits down to work with me, they're already anticipating my big smile and my warm welcome. It makes them feel special, important, and that they want to be there. When you're working online, of course, you have to take it up a notch further. You don't have to be a party entertainer, but you do have to be really, really present and give it your all.
So and you have to rely on your voice a lot more, right? And your face.
Yeah.
Like you don't have your entire body to be using, but sometimes it's actually good to use your body, right?
Yeah.
Because it helps us actually build a little bit more enthusiasm in the session. Even if they can't see it, they can feel it and sense it in your voice and the way
That's
that you
really interesting. I do think it's interesting how the wave has come back since we've been working online, yeah, and lots of thumbs up. All of a sudden, like you would never do that in real life, but all of a sudden those become part of the way that we communicate. And I have a colleague, Dave Harris, who's a very experienced tutor, who stands. He says that he just communicates more energy at a standing desk than he does sitting down. He says he's a standing tutor. So lots of different ways to communicate and build energy in your presentation. That was really nice. Thanks for bringing that in. The next part about positivity that I wanted to share with you is friendliness. And the way we talk about it in Qualified Tutor is we talk about being friendly rather than being friends. And that's a really important distinction because your student doesn't need you to be their friend. They have friends. They don't need you to be their peer. They need you to be what we call a trusted adult. And you may only have a few years, of age gap between you, and that's completely irrelevant here. The point is that you're in a professional role, and so your friendliness shouldn't overspill into being friends. What rather friendliness means being on your team. And how much more relevant is that now during lockdown? Coronavirus has separated us and has isolated so many of us, and children are thirsty for community. So if you can be somebody who's on their team, who's rooting for them, it's really, really powerful stuff. A teacher in a classroom wants to give positive feedback to every single student all through the day, but they struggle to be able to reach every student. If your student knows that you are on their team, that's a massive, massive plus. One of the powerful ways of being friendly, like you and I did before we pressed record tonight, was to say, hi, how you doing? And a tutor might worry that taking 5 minutes out of the session to say, hi, how you doing, is wasteful. The parent or the school is paying for every minute of my time. Is it okay for me to stop and chat? My feeling is, and most of the experienced tutors that I work with agree, that 5 minutes that you spend makes the rest of your time so much more efficient, because if anything's on the student's mind, they get a chance to share it. And if anything is going to get in the way of their learning, you'll find it out then. And crucially, and this is going to take us on to personalization, you get to find out interesting stuff about them, and you can build that into the way that you tutor.
Yeah, I think it's also the fact that how can you demonstrate that you're on their team when you don't even ask, right? Like there's an aspect there, you just, let's just brush away the kind of friendliness aspect and get straight down to business. Like certainly it depends on the age range, right? But even adults, at least in sort of the cultures that I'm probably more familiar with, we don't like that because it sort of feels like more and more like a transaction, and it's hard to get more out of a transaction that way. And then it is about minutes, right? Yeah, we only went through 30 minutes, rather than 35 or whatever it might be. Like if you haven't had that rapport, I'm not going to be listening as hard. You're going to have to work twice as hard to get through whatever you're trying to get through to me at that time. If you haven't let me kind of even have that buffer to be able to let go of my stuff for the day, then I'm not going to be listening again. So it's just this investment. I really like the way that you position that as that kind of investment up front.
One of the things that we talk about is relationship matters. And the phrase is that relationship is the conduit for learning. I want to hear what you have to say because I'm interested in you. That's a big deal, And if you can create that relationship, that vehicle for learning between you and your student, that availability, I'm interested in you, tell me what you think on this subject, then your student is going to have that transformational learning experience that we're really onto. And it's so interesting, Alex, that you sort of touched on that transactional, because we think about transactional tutoring a lot, and it's really not what we aspire to. We're here to solve problems. We want to help, but we want to help with a bigger vision.
Totally.
So let's go on and talk about personalization. I see a lot of purple unicorns in my tutoring, I really do. And I have a feeling I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about BMXs in the next few weeks as well. You know, a teacher doesn't have the luxury to personalize every lesson for every student. You can have student-led projects, but in general, you know, if you need to teach science, then you're teaching it in this format. And if you need to teach writing, then you're going to pick a book. How much more freedom does a tutor have to pitch everything, to place everything around the student's own interests? And what's interesting is that you can think about knowledge and you can think about skills. And sometimes we're in the role of imparting knowledge or revising knowledge. And sometimes we're in the role of developing skills. But in both cases, you can personalize the work. So one of the examples I use in the blog that I'm going to share with you after this is, if you're doing Hamlet, you can do it as a comic book. You can really write and publish a comic book analyzing, you know, the plot of Hamlet. And if you are doing, if you're practicing reading or writing, like I say, I'm going to be doing it on BMXs this week. So choose the topic that you're working on and find ways to make it really, really relevant for your students, because why wouldn't you fire up their interests? A friend of mine who, Helen Kenworthy from the Complete Works tutoring company, she talks about a student that she worked with who was on the autistic spectrum and really, really struggled in small group work, unless you got him on a special subject. Yeah. I'm not sure I remember what it was, but once she found his special subject, he became the expert in the group and he was so forthcoming. So even those students who really, really struggle, if you can find their hook, the thing that really, really brings them to life, you've got so much more chance to get through to them. So if you're building a reward chart, let them choose the color and the picture. And if you're doing a book, let them help you choose it. And if you're doing maths, count whatever it is that they're interested in. And I'll give you one more thing before we move on to the next step. And that is that if I write maths problems for a student, and I very often have those ready on the whiteboard beforehand, I'll put the child's name in. Yeah. We'll be planning their birthday party, or that child will be going shopping, and I'll have picked up the names of a few of his friends from those lovely chats that we've had earlier. So that way I can make it really feel like this is not a textbook. This is a learning session. Yeah, it's totally right as well. Like a lot of the time, you know, I'm in, like, obviously in technology, like ed technology, right? Yeah. And a lot of the time we kind of hear people sort of suggesting, you know, hey, there are apps that can do these things really well, and it's absolutely true. But when you think about a tutor, what's the thing that is evergreen about a tutor is your creativity. Yeah. And your ability to think laterally. I mean, just like there's even those little boxes, like those captures that you get on the computer that like, are you a human, basically? Like, yeah, those are the things that we still got. Like, we still got over the machines. And so if you're not bringing that humanness to the session, and that's why, again, I think the point that we're talking about before around that investment in the student, which means knowing them, knowing what motivates them and excites them. If you haven't done that work beforehand, you can't do this next step that you're talking very well. It'll actually just feel like generic. And then I am wondering, why am I paying for this? So really great points on personalization. Let's take it a bit further, though. The role of the mentor is what's never going to be lost. Yeah. So Oak Academy and Khan Academy can be bringing us as many fantastic recorded videos as possible. All these brilliant responsive apps are allowing us to build responsive programs that are tailored to each individual child. But if you don't have a caring person, a trusted adult leading them through, then it doesn't make meaning out of the learning. That's it. Yeah, and I think, again, sort of reiterating these points because they're so interrelated. Yeah. If you have that friendliness, as you kind of put, rather than friends, you can create a mentor relationship, which is actually, I'm not saying it's not better than a friend. It just gives you different capabilities, right? When you're a mentor, you can say things that are different and in a way that's different to a friend. And so that's why that really resonated with me around that professionalism
and bring that friendliness to the session, and how that then passes on to personalization.
It's beautiful because we're also talking about there is feedback. What is the thing that a mentor can do that a friend can't? Is give the powerful feedback that's going to help you to grow. If you'd like to hear more about the ideas we touch on here, or gain the tools to take your own tutoring to the next level, the Qualification for Tutors could be for you. This live online seminar is facilitated by industry experts who, over 4 Zoom workshops, will cover the foundations of teaching and learning and how it relates to you as a tutor. The workshops are full of rich discussions where you'll learn alongside other tutors and connect on a professional level. We will teach you how to be the kind of tutor every child remembers. Visit our community space at qualifiedtutorcommunity.org and sign up now for our transformative course. We'll see you there.
Brilliant. So what's our third topic? So I think this is brilliant. You've gone positivity, we've got personalization. Our third one is?
This is a twofer.
Oh.
Pitch and pace. We always talk about them together in teaching, and the majority of lesson observations that I've done in the classroom, it's the pitch or the pace that's off. And if a teacher can nail the pitch and the pace, the engagement is that the children are with her in the lesson. And it's even more so in tutoring, because tutoring is a precision art. There's no excuse for not pitching and pacing your work effectively when you're working with one student.
Yeah.
Of course, well, let me just clarify. Pitch means how hard or easy the work is, the level of work. And pace means how quickly or slowly you go. So just to sort of unpack that a little bit, you could, number one, you need to know your student. So you need to always be starting with assessment. An assessment could be a formal written piece, or it could be just doing the kinds of activities that let you get a feel for their strengths and their weaknesses. So once you have an idea about where your student is, you're pitching the work at that level and you're constantly adjusting. So the phrase that we use is be a thermostat, not a thermometer. What does a thermometer do? It tells you what the temperature is like. What does a thermostat do? It adjusts the temperature to the optimum. So a tutor has to be like a thermostat, constantly adjusting to make sure that the student is receiving the optimum learning point. So let's say that you've got your pitch right. You also need to think about how quickly or slowly you're going. Specifically, there are students in every classroom who have what we call slow processing speed disorder, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's not that they can't get it, they just can't get it quickly. If you slow down and give them way more thinking time than you're comfortable with, then they'll get it. And all of a sudden, this child who never gets past 50% in a test gets to the end of the test because you just gave them more time. Now, there are, arrangements for exams, access arrangements to make sure that a child who has had special educational needs assessment can get this in exams. But it's a problem that students will have every single day in the classroom. And simply by slowing things down for them, you enable them to fill their own gaps. It's not that they can't do it, they just can't do it quickly. Equally, there are some children who are just quick, and the teacher has to slow down and explain it again to everybody else in the class, by which time they're looking out the window, doodling all over their work, and you've lost them for the rest of the session. I see children with their hands in the air like this all lesson, and they're just not getting what they need. And it's not that they can't do it, it's just that the pace is off. So get the pitch right, get the pace right, and they will be right with you at their learning point. I sort of think about it like driving a manual, if anybody drives manuals anymore, the biting point. If you can get that biting point, they are poised and available for learning.
Got it. How do you, one of the things that, first of all, I really like that, that metaphor. I think it helps you adjust each session. But equally, that's the point that I was trying to work out if you had any techniques or tips on. But is every time you have that first 5 minutes, it's trying to assess where they're at, right? Or do you feel that it's like you've got to set the pace rather than letting do you have an opinion on that?
I do. I have lots of opinions on that. In fact, we're going to record another presentation on that.
Okay.
The skill of a first session
Sure.
is its own art, because you need to get to know them, but you need to achieve something in the session.
Yeah.
So getting the balance right. I have a few tips and tricks. We'll cover it separately because I want to go in depth in that in the way that we're doing this.
Sounds brilliant.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's fly onwards then. Now that we've covered pitch and pace, our twofer, the last one is partnership. And this is really the rocket power, because when we talk about partnership, we're talking about partnership in learning. If you can get into the habit of teaching your students to see their own learning process, that was hard for you. Which part of that was hard for you? Did you think you were going to manage that? Those are the questions that teach them to reflect not just on the outcomes of their activity, but actually on the process they've been through. And since, I give you another thing about tutors, we're trying to make ourselves redundant. Yeah, what we really want to do is teach a man to fish. If we can get the students to become independent learners, to be able to cope with the classroom or to be able to access learning by themselves, that's really our goal. We want to make ourselves redundant. And the way to do that is to basically teach the student to be their own tutor. Mm-hmm. You know that we have, so this is metacognition and self-regulation. That's what we're talking about. And the evidence in teaching is that this is the most effective skill that you can teach a child or any student. If you can show a student how to organize their learning process, I'm going to need this in order to learn that. Mm-hmm. So I need to go and acquire this knowledge so that I can answer that question. So somebody asked me recently, one of the participants in one of our courses said to me, what is metacognition? And I said to them, that was the fact that you didn't know what metacognition was and you needed to find out in order to practice this strategy is the understanding that we need students to have. When a student reads a difficult text and they're looking for vocabulary that they don't understand, it's already a level for them to see that they didn't get it. Mm-hmm. That's already a level of understanding for them. And if you can sort of slightly remove their purchase from the in the moment learning to sort of let them be reflective in the same way that we must be reflective and think about, I didn't understand that word in a sentence. Does that mean I don't understand the sentence? If it does, I need to find out what that word means. I understand the sentence even without that word, which means I can probably work out what that word means. Those kinds of skills, those are skills that you and I are self-aware of. We know how we're deploying them. If we can teach our students to ask themselves those questions, or at least to notice when they've done it, then we're building a partner in learning. So one of the ways that I do that with a student is I talk to them about the importance of their learning. I talk to them about growth mindset. Have you and I spoken about growth mindset before? No,
I've looked into it a lot though. It's a brilliant bit of work and a fantastic concept to
it's very enabling.
Very much so.
You know, and teaching students that their brains will grow and develop is something that's quite established in schools nowadays. And one of the advantages of that is there's tons of really good resources. So I've been showing my students recently a clip from Adapted Mind, which is a really nice platform. And they have an area which they call their super skills. And the first little video there is two little aliens talking about being scared in algebra class, and how the little alien works out that she discovers that no, her brain is a muscle, and if she tackles challenge, she gets stronger. Okay. So whether you're working with a young child or an older child, teaching them that the learning point is where the challenge is, you know, teaching them that you don't want them to get 10 out of 10. You want them to get 8 out of 10, because then you know that the work's hard enough. You know that you're pushing them forward. That's the service that you're doing for them. And a tutoring session it has to be a partnership. I can't do learning to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to show up. You have to bring it.
I think what I really like about that concept as well is it's a magnifier, right? If you turn up to every session and you just ace it, they get 100% out of that tutoring session in terms of what they learnt. But if they're only literally just learning information, for me, that's not a very good tutoring session. There's no magnification aspect there, right? Whereas if you've taken them through a process in that tutoring session, that next time they're in a classroom, they're like, now I know how to teach myself. Like every time they do any kind of work outside of your session, they're going to be getting better. Right. And if what you're selling is an outcome, which I believe people aren't like, hey, I really like spending money on tutoring. They're like, I really want an outcome for my child that's different than what they're getting. Then there could be no better way of helping the student than helping them become an independent. I talk of like in the idea of user, but let's call them a learner, an independent learner, because then they're always going to be getting better, whether they're with you or when they're out with friends or something or whatever it might be. They're always going to be getting better. So I really like that point.
That's great. We do talk about the spillover effect, and you find that even if you Johnny Manning has this data that if you revise one specific topic with a student in maths, you'll find he'll do better on the whole test next week. Doesn't make any sense. But he simply learned that it was worth applying himself a little bit longer because he might find the answer if he just sticks with it. And we have a lovely podcast that we did with Johnny Manning and Amy Garr, who's a head teacher that he's worked with in the past. And the key thing, and it's always stuck with me, he said it's one of the first times that her students make a connection between effort and attainment.
Sure.
So for those students to all of a sudden see that if I put the effort in, I will do better, which is bonkers that's news to them, right, at 15 years old. But it is because they haven't seen attainment before. They never reach that sweet spot of attainment.
Absolutely. Well, Julia, this has been brilliant. We've really covered a lot. And basically, we covered positivity. I think we went through that really well, through that personalization, pitch and pace, that twofer that you're telling us about, right. And then the partnership that we've just gone through. That's so great. Those are 4 fantastic strategies that I think, again, can help any tutor in any field, because these are like foundational skills and foundational approaches.
The way that we talk about it, Alex, is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker's famous phrase. So the idea is that if you can get your mindset straight, then these strategies will just fall into place for you.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Julia. I really appreciate it today.
Pleasure. That was really fun. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference.